Well, welcome everybody. This is Grant Making with Sports Philanthropy Network. I'm glad everybody is here today. We got some experts here in the grant making field, and we look forward to learning as much information as possible about them. We have Bridget Niland, the Director of Youth Sports Initiatives with Project Play Western New York, Judy Gadiel, Senior Vice President of Evolved Giving Group, and Nicole Matuska, and I'm sure I just said it wrong, Senior Program Manager with Women Win. So I'll let you guys introduce yourselves, and thank you for being here today.
Great, I can go first quickly. So this is Nicole Matuska. As Ryan said, I'm a Senior Program Manager with an organization called Women Win. We're a global nonprofit, a leader in girls and women's empowerment through sport. So we really leverage the power of sport and play to help adolescent girls and young women build their leadership and be better equipped to exercise their rights. We work kind of all over the world in different regions. Probably since 2007, we've impacted the lives through kind of our partners on the ground, over 3 million adolescent girls in over 100 different countries. So work with quite a lot of diverse regions and contexts and groups. And we collaborate with a wide variety of organizations. So women's grassroots organizations, corporates, development, sport for development organizations, government bodies and agencies, supporting these initiatives in Asia, Africa, the Middle East, North and South America. And our main programs focus on sort of 3 rights-based pillars. So one is gender-based violence, so using sport to address that in communities. The other is addressing sexual and reproductive health and rights. And the last one is creating economic empowerment and resilience in adolescent girls through sport.
Wonderful. Hi, everybody. I'm Judy Gadiel. I am from Evolved Giving Group, which is a nonprofit consulting company based in Chicago. So Chicago is our home, and we work with nonprofit organizations around the country and some internationally as well, and really supporting nonprofits in their ability to provide services and to fulfill their missions. Fundraising is probably the biggest area that we support nonprofits with, and also work with them around governance, executive search, operations support, and really just kind of working to, again, as I said, to help organizations do what they need to do to be able to serve their mission. So we do a lot in the grant space, and I'm happy to be here with all of you.
Hi, my name's Bridget Niland. It's great to join Nicole and Judy and Brian. Thank you for moderating. I'm the director of Project Play Western New York, which is part of the Ralph C. Wilson Jr. Foundation Youth Sport Initiative. Mr. Wilson was owner of the Bills. He and both his wife, Mary Wilson, were great advocates of youth sports. And when he passed away, he left a portion, his $1 billion, to both Southeast Michigan and Western New York. They have several funding lines, one of which is youth sports. We oversee the work to kind of change the narrative around youth sports and fund accordingly. So we're trying to make sure that kids are not priced out, pushed out, or burnt out of youth sports. And so we work with multiple non-for-profits. We run our own legacy fund youth sports program that operates through the Community Foundation for Greater Buffalo. And then additionally, again, as we convene various non-for-profits and youth-serving organizations around the subject matter of youth sports, we also hope to identify fundable opportunities for the Wilson Foundation out of Detroit. So to date, we've been in existence since 2018 through our legacy funds. We have already dispersed close to $2 million to nonprofits in our regions, and that's just coming from our funds. The Wilson Foundation themselves has granted out over $20 million in the youth sports space in both regions.
That's great. I mean, that's exciting in itself right there. And being a Michigan person, that it makes it even more exciting for me to be able to see that, Bridget. So thank you very much. Nicole, I'll let you take it over from here.
Yeah, great. Thank you. So I can talk a little bit, I'd love to start to just kind of introduce a new direction that Women Win is going in terms of grant making and providing funding. So we since 2007, when we were founded, we started out as a grant making organization. We were a women's fund. We kind of spun out of another women's fund and really just focused on sport as a strategy for women's rights. And I think in 2007, when we put our first call out for applications, we had maybe enough funding to fund around 10 organizations at around $10,000 US or something like that. It was very humble beginnings, and we got over 100 applications from around the world of like grassroots programs really interested in using sport as a strategy. You know, and back in 2007, we were just kind of starting to talk about sport for development and youth development globally and internationally, and even talking about it from a girls' rights perspective wasn't a big discussion yet. But there were so many organizations that were interested in exploring that, and so we quickly realized that you know, we need to expand and figure out how to reach more organizations and support in more ways than just funding. So, you know, apart from funding, we kind of grew out and started doing some capacity building and technical support for organizations and government federations and things like that. And, you know, being technical support, technical support for like large international NGOs like UN Women or the IOC. But we still have kind of kept our funding portfolio, and it was always kind of a traditional form of grant making in the sense that, you know, we would receive money from donors interested in potentially investing in East Africa or interested in investing in Southeast Asia. We would do kind of a scoping due diligence, you know, connect with organizations in those areas and kind of make decisions as an organization with the donor kind of passing through those funds as to who would get funded based on applications and proposals. Recently, we've kind of started really shifting and trying to better understand the models of participatory grant making. So thinking about how the voices and the decision-making processes of who gets funded in certain regions can really be led by the organizations and the young people, especially the adolescent girls who are leading some of these movements in those regions. So as an organization, we've started creating kind of these pilot funds, one of them being the Onside Fund that we just launched, which really uses participatory grant making and a shared governance model to actually be the funding mechanism. Women Win kind of acts as the fiscal sponsor in the sense that we are kind of the back of the house operations, managing the flow of money and doing sort of all of the financial due diligence on all sides. However, there is an advisory committee that kind of works around the selection process and the decisions of where the funding goes to, what regions we put the calls out for. And then in the future, and this is what we're striving to get to, really make it truly participatory in the sense that we have peer review panels that review the applications coming in. So young feminist activists in these regions actually making decisions on what activists or groups or individuals are getting this funding and how it's used. And honestly, with COVID, and we were talking a little bit earlier about challenges with this challenging funding landscape and COVID, this actually has helped us really also think about the flexibility of our funding. So, again, traditionally our funding has often been very tied to programmatic outcomes and indicators and kind of everything you think about when you are, talking about writing a proposal and trying to prove the impact of your work as a sports organization. And with COVID and just the struggle for sustainability and long-term impact with your organization and ensuring your organization is sustainable, we've kind of also moved to more flexible forms of funding that require sort of less reporting and allow you to invest it in kind of core capacity building for your organization, in advocacy efforts to help increase the sustainability and your impact in the community, and things like that. Investment in technology so that to ensure your organization can weather these sort of pandemic storms, as we dip in and out of this situation in the future. So, for us, it's a learning journey as a funder. We've traditionally, like I said, funded in a very traditional way. And we're now just really trying to explore and kind of come to this with really open eyes and open ears in terms of listening to how this money should be spent from the people who are going to spend it, as opposed to us trying to dictate. And it's worked out really well because for these funds, we've been able to pool resources and it's a pooled fund essentially. So rather than just having one donor fund one project, we're now able to bring, multiple donors into a shared pool funding structure, which then allows for more flexibility because we don't have those restrictive donor requirements on our end either, as the organization that's providing that service. So it's been really exciting for us. I think COVID has opened up a lot of new opportunities for us in terms of being a funder and a grant maker. And yeah, we're really excited to kind of continue along this process of just participatory grant making, shared governance models, and just a more decolonized way of providing funding, considering we are a Northern Hemisphere, European and US based organization providing mostly funding to the Southern Hemisphere. So I'll leave it at that and pass it along.
Great, Judy?
Yeah, that's great. I'm really, I think that's super exciting. And thank you for sharing that, Nicole. And I think it points to, I think, one of the things that jumped out at me is, right, which I'm sure we'll get to later, is in terms of how you guys are funded versus, the type of foundation that Bridget, right, works for, that's coming from a family. So I'm sure there'll be places to unpack around that. But I think the piece that I wanted to talk about, so as I mentioned, we work as a consultant for a number of different nonprofits. And so we work with organizations around both sides of the funding of the grant making. So we work with organizations who are looking to receive grants from foundations and helping support them through that process on all the different levels that needs help with, and also work with foundations and helping them to kind of get clear around their systems and their priorities and what's important to them. So I kind of get to do it from both ends, which is great. So I wanted to just talk a little bit about, I think, regardless of the type of foundation, there's a couple kind of really important things that I think are just crucial to have ready for you and to have part of your process and part of your application when you are applying to funders. So that's a couple of things that I wanted to touch base on. And again, I think these are pretty universal in terms of regardless of the type of foundation that you're applying for grants or the type of grant that you're looking for, whether that's general operating or programmatic support or whatever. So I think one is, as a funder, I think people are looking for, have you clearly defined your problem, right? And does that problem match the giving priorities of the foundation? So as a funder, I would look at what you're telling me in defining your problem. Does it make sense? Have you clearly identified what that problem is? And have you clearly proposed a solution that makes sense with that problem? And again, does it match the priorities that the foundation is looking to connect with? So you can have a wonderfully defined problem and a great solution, but if that doesn't connect with what the funder is interested in, then there's a misalignment there, and that's gonna, that's certainly gonna get in the way of you getting support from the foundation. So making sure that the problem is clearly defined and that you have a solution that makes sense, again, and that it connects with the foundation. Another piece that Bridget mentioned earlier, so I'm sure she'll touch on that, is making sure that you have really in your proposal and have really thought through, what are you looking to do? What are those goals? What are your objectives, and how are you measuring them? So how are you defining success? What does success mean to you as an organization, and how are you going to show that to the funder? Again, whether that's on a programmatic basis for a very specific program that already is operating or you're looking to start, or whether that's as an organization. But how are you defining success? Again, what does that look like, and how are you measuring that, and how are you going to show that back and show your impact back to the funder? A third piece that is super important that I think is people, in my experience, shy away from or get really nervous around is doing your budget. And I think being able to clearly show a organizational and a programmatic budget is really important. And as a funder, the things that I look at is, are you really showing me everything that it takes to run your program or to run your organization? So some of the things that I see people forgetting a lot or not including in a project budget is staff time. So there's always some staff component that's involved in running that program, and you need to be accounting for that in your budget as well. The easier things are supplies or transportation if you're, driving kids to, one facility to another, or sports equipment, but the staff time is something that is often overlooked. A lot of sports programs specifically use volunteers in doing some of the work, and making sure that you're representing those volunteer hours in your budget as well. And people will often say, like, why is that important? I'm not paying my volunteers. But the way that I like to think about it is, if your volunteers stopped volunteering for you, right, you would not be able to run the program. So what would you need to do? What kind of funding would you need to be able to support the piece that volunteers support, right? So just making sure that you're including that in your budget. And you can do that as our dollars in, dollars out, right, if that's even, but that again has to be represented in that. So just to really make sure that you spend some time looking at that programmatically and organizationally, and including everything that you need to know, everything that it takes to run your program or your organization. And as funders also, many funders, although again, everyone is different, don't want to be the only person, the only funder that is supporting your project. Some do, right? But again, every foundation is different, but making sure that you're also showing what other areas are you getting support from for your program. And then the last piece that I want to look at is really your capacity as an organization to fulfill what you say you're going to fulfill. So do you have a staffing structure in place that's actually able to support that? Do you have an infrastructure in place that can support that? So again, what is just your capacity as an organization? If you're talking about scaling something, taking it from a very small program, expanding it to multiple regions, do you then have that ability to do that from an infrastructure perspective? So I think that's really important to think about. And again, just something that when I'm working with organizations around how to prepare grants for foundations, these are the couple areas that I think often get missed. And I just wanted to make sure and connect them. And I think the last piece I'll say around that is, I think organizations, and again, I think, Bridget and Nicole are more right now in this space of making those grant making decisions, so can speak to this too. But I think I always say there's no shortage of good ideas, right? Like everybody has great ideas. So I think important to say, like, why are you uniquely qualified to solve this problem that you've identified, right? You're probably not the only organization that has identified this as a need. But what do you bring to the table? Why are you uniquely qualified to solve this problem, and why now? What is important about that now, and how are you going to do that? What's different about your approach, and how can you show that that's going to show some impact moving forward? So those are just kind of, general thoughts. And again, I think I look forward to more conversation around these pieces as we move forward.
Thanks, Judy.
Over to you, Bridget.
Thanks. I wanted to be careful because I think that it is really easy to, like some great points by the previous speaker. So I just kind of want to highlight and then fill in perhaps a little bit more from my experience and the experience of Project Play and the Ralph C. Wilson Jr. Foundation. I think a little bit is just through how I got to this position of where I'm in as now a grant maker. I was typically on the other side of requesting it, and largely through collegiate sports. So when I became a college athletics director, we were moving into NCAA Division II, and we did not have a rich history of alumni. It was a single-sex school, basically focused on humanities and social services, which is wonderful in terms of community impact, but does not create a robust alumni from which you are going to fundraise from. And I know some people may have inherited that same situation. So we started out, and that was kind of, I'm a lawyer by trade, so you just kind of, where could we possibly develop funding from? And I think a lot of people came to grant funding the way I did, which is I have a need, and who funds this area? And so you get on, you sit with your development person, and they get you a database of grants, and you start going through them. And this was prior to the creation of the Wilson Foundation. So very limited funding in the youth sports space. But at Damon College, where I was athletics director, we wanted to start a youth sports program to kind of fill in our quiet time during the summer. And we were looking for grant money to offset that. And so I think a lot of people enter the grant space with a need, and they get focused on that need. And there were times that we needed funding for fields, and we needed funding. And so the grantee has a need, and they start looking for grantors that can fill that need. And sometimes you really have to be careful there, because you need to flip the mindset. So now, sitting on the other side of the table, I'll always remind people it's, it's a play off of a John Kennedy quote, but remember, it's not so much what the foundation can do for you, it's what you are going to help the foundation do. And that really goes into my next. So it's about alignment. Do you align? I mean, you may topically align, but do you align with what the foundation wants to accomplish in their region or through that grant program? And it's a big lawyerly like word, that word alignment is, but it just boils down, can you help? Can you help them do something? They are funding, we fund youth sport organizations in our region to provide quality, accessible youth sports programming. Like, so we can't do that ourselves. So we want to fund organizations to do that. So it's about finding that. And once you do find that alignment, and I think very much what Judy is getting to is the importance of storytelling, the importance of having a compelling story that shows you will be able to do that for the foundation, and you will be a good steward of the foundation's money. And that kind of bleeds in. So you have alignment, the importance of storytelling, and then just, you know, that stewardship, demonstrating good stewardship. And how do you demonstrate good stewardship? Because again, there's a fund that has decided to fund you. How are you going to decide, or how are you going to demonstrate that you're going to be a good steward of the foundation's money? And that gets demonstrated in a lot of ways, mostly through the application, but there are little nuances. And I really want to highlight a couple that Judy made, just because I think they really resonate from being that person that reads it, is budget. Budget is big, and a comprehensive budget, not just what you're going to ask for the foundation from, but really show us everything you're investing into a particular program. And I think Judy made an excellent point about that kind of in-kind stuff that people often don't count for. Your manpower, like you said, whether it's coming through a volunteer or coming through staff, like that has a dollar sign to it. And although sometimes we do not want to see a personnel heavy grant application, if it's an in-kind or situation, show that, because that is, you know, some sweat capital is going into lining up those volunteers, training those volunteers, and making sure they can do that work for you. You know, but facility space. So, you know, often when I was on the application side of it and filling them out for Damon, is, you know, obviously we were not going to ask for money for the facility space, but that was, we were giving that. So how much would that, what was the retail cost of that facility space that the foundation now doesn't need to go out and get, or a youth sports programmer you're partnering with? The other way to show is collaboration. Who are you bringing in to the fold to help you do this work? Can you do it on your own? And for that, I want to show a brief story, because I think both personal, and then one where I was the entity that probably didn't have it all in line yet, and another one where I saw it happen as a grant maker. We had put together at Damon, a wonderful Girls in Sport Day with the University of Buffalo. We had T-shirts, we had thought of everything. We had flyered out to the elementary schools and the Girl Scouts and all of that. We'd done our marketing, right? But we didn't build a relationship with any of those organizations. So we just thought that the event itself would sell, right? Turns out, despite everything we had one girl. If you counted my kids, it went up to like 4, okay? And it was a Saturday morning, and we had all this great stuff. And it was such a learning moment for me and all of us that puts together, is what did we miss? And what we missed is, although we thought we were pretty well marketed, we had it out, we didn't do any personal invites. We didn't do anything on the front end. And some of you might say, wow, that was like a JV mistake, Bridget. You should have seen that coming. You know, but again, I think some of you might be in those shoes where you have a great idea and you think you're going to market it. And I'll tell you, you could have a great marketing plan, but the most surefire marketing plan is to say that, you know, in our case, we went back and we did it the second year, but this year, the Damon College, in collaboration with the Girl Scouts of Western New York, we went and found people, the Amherst Public, schools. We went and made sure on the front end that we had individuals already lined up to come, rather than thinking that. So tell that story. Who are you aligning with? If you are putting on a youth sports programming or any type of programming that you want grant funded and you're seeking grant money for, who's your populator is what I call it. If you're the programmer, who's your populator? How are you making sure that you're going to have the impact that you've indicated to the foundation that you're going to have? And then lastly, and make sure those letters of support is in there. Tell that story, tell the complete story. But then the last piece too is continue to build the relationship. When we send out our both our rejections, right? So we get typically, we can probably fund, we're pretty actually lucky, we're pretty high, about 30 to 40% of our applications get funded. But at the end, I always write, and especially if I write at the letter, the email, like, please reach out to us, set up an appointment if you want feedback. And sometimes I never hear from people. And I remember that when we got that letter, when I was on the applicant side, I always, can I find out why? And most of the time, it depends on the foundation, but most of the time, they'll offer that to you. They'll say, listen, it was a great proposal, but it lacked this, this, and this, or it didn't rank high on this, this, and this. And that's really important. And it's kind of like that student-professor relationship that we all had, either if we're still teaching or we were in a classroom. It's about kind of showing that interest, showing that sincere interest in what the foundation is trying to do and listening to their feedback. And then, being thoughtful the second time around of whether it was an alignment problem, find something that better aligns with what they're trying to do. If it was, we didn't see the collaboration, we didn't see the populators, we didn't see that part. And that's what I'll end with. Kind of my last story is we had a great, on the flip side of this, my first year with the foundation, we had a great grant application that, it got through and it got funded, but we're really worried about that relationship piece. But they had done a lot of reach out and had letters of support. But again, that, when they came back to report our outcomes, is those letters of support didn't result in actually being able to spend the dollars. And that actually happens. So, being honest, communicating that, and then again, like, okay, ask for an extension if you still haven't spent the money, and then make sure you fix it on the outside. So it's that relationship building and looking at it. I guess my last word on it is, sometimes we step into the seeking grants very transactionally. We're looking for a transaction. And I think you really have to broaden your scope and realize it's a relationship, and you want to make sure you're continuing to build that relationship.
Thanks, Bridget. That was very, very, very insightful. Nicole, did you want to add anything more on that?
Yeah, just, to build off a little bit about Bridget and you talking about partnerships and alignment, I think that holds true for us as well. In terms of just the, looking for people with a mission and vision that aligns with ours. I think, we also get unsolicited grant, requests for money where it's like, hi, we have a, football program in Kenya and we want to build new fields so more girls can play, and that's great. However, that the idea of like empowering girls, but, building their leadership and the girls' rights angle is kind of what we're looking for first and foremost, that your organization's mission and vision aligns with what we're trying to do as a nonprofit as well. So, kind of like how you go into the conversation and the story you tell first, which isn't like what Bridget said, it was, I need a field so more girls play, start from the mission and vision kind of aspect of it and win our hearts that way. And then we'll fund your field kind of thing. So I guess, yeah, just from a alignment perspective, I completely agree. And it holds true for us as well.
I think the dog did too. Judy?
Yeah, I think what a couple of things struck me. One of them, I think, is just, again, for advice or for guidance for grant seekers, is really do your research and do your homework, because there are a lot of foundations out there. And in order to seek that alignment, in order to make sure, you don't want to waste your own time. You don't want to waste a program officer's time by, sending an application that's not going to get funded. So I would say just really making sure that you do your research. There's a lot of resources out there to do research, everything from Google searches to foundation directory, to looking at 990s, to looking at websites. So, there's lots of places for small and large foundations, maybe a little bit of different tactics depending on the size, but there's always ways to find information. And one of the things I also see organizations doing is when they do submit for, if they're submitting to the foundation directory for research or doing their own looking at 990s, foundations can designate if they accept unsolicited requests for proposals, or if it's an open, like an open proposal, open RFP. And I see a lot of organizations who, when they see that box checked that says we do not accept unsolicited requests, then they rule that out and move on. And I would just, put it out there to consider, that's an invitation to try to build a relationship. So it doesn't mean that the foundation's never going to fund you. It just means that they're not going to accept, rolling applications, but they want to me, that's the invitation, that they want to hear from you. They want you to reach out to them and say, here I am, and I think that we would be a good fit for you, and can we have a conversation? And certainly it sounds like Bridget's in a space is very open to have those conversations, and some foundations are not, right? And it is more, submit something online and we'll get back to you. But my experience is that many want to have that conversation, again, because they don't want to waste your time or their time. So I think doing your research and then, taking it to the next level and, is really important. And I think also, Bridget's comment about the relationship. So I often compare foundation relationships to like individual major giving, right? And you're not going to get a gift, a capacity level gift from a major donor the first time that you have a conversation with them, right? And that relationship with a foundation is very similar. So they need to get to know you. They need to understand who you are. They need to, see your alliances and your partnerships and what is the impact that you're doing. And so it very much is an ongoing process, very much the way that you would approach a new individual donor as a prospect. So those are my thoughts. I did have a question for you, Bridget, that I think always comes up for me in the organizations that I work for. And so since you mentioned it, I think it'd be great to talk a little bit about. You mentioned about being a good steward. And I think that's something that I always hear from organizations of how much do we reach out to program officers? How much do we send them during our work during the year? Like it's very clear, there's very clear touch points when a report is due or, before you're due for renewal. But in general, like people always ask me, what do you recommend in terms of connecting with the foundations throughout the year? So I was just wondering if you wanted to comment, what does that mean to you about being a good steward and seeing that from organizations?
I think so it is for me, and this is so true. I think what you said, Judy, about kind of understanding, and there's usually, and even in the larger cities, I'm finding that people can kind of get a vibe about a foundation and the people, and that's good. That's kind of good recon to do. So you can kind of understand where they want the level of communication about the stewardship. But I would think when I think of a good steward is we like to hear from them. How is it going? I even like to hear, especially in COVID times, I like to hear, even hey, well, let's put it this way, always respond to emails even after you got the money, okay? So that, and again, this would be some sort of commonplace, but honestly, you'd be surprised. Always fulfill your reports on time. Commonplace, you'd be surprised. And sometimes it's a capacity issue. And so I understand that. And I will share one story on that is we have a really good grantee. They do great work. I know they're working with the kids. I know they're reaching out to them. They do lack capacity. And so, they're not always great about getting their reports in. And I'm kind of a middleman at times because our report folks are above, they're in a different, and they'll be like, how can they not be getting their reports in? And I'll have to pick up the phone and say, I know you're stretched for time. I know you're focused on the young people that you're serving, but you have to get your reports in on time and understand that. Or like I said, you kind of likened it to a major giving relationship, honestly. And maybe it's just because that's my base is being a college professor, but honestly, communicate struggles, build the relationship, let people know what they're doing. So, get those easy benchmarks in, but we always like to hear, like if you had a great day and you had, hey, Bridget, and I get these all the time and they're awesome. And I love to share them with Mrs. Wilson and Mary Wilson and the program officers up over at the Ralph C. Wilson Foundation. We had a great day today. Here's some pictures or here's a video. Like that is wonderful to see. And again, you're building that relationship. The other good steward is being mindful of what the foundation is doing and what we might be funding and what we might be offering and showing up at that, So if the foundation is offering, is launching an event or doing something, just again, make sure it's just not coming off as transactional. It doesn't mean if it's transactional that it won't work. but you'll get so much more as a grantee, and the funder will feel so much more better about the relationship if they know that it is kind of mutual working together towards achieving the foundation's goal. So, you know, simple benchmarks, yes, do that. Respond to emails, get the reports in on time, share even outside those windows, good things. Share if you're struggling, reach out, let people know. Again, show up at the foundation's events other than where you're kind of looking. You don't have to be at everything, but show an interest and be sincere in building the relationship. I will kind of there's an analogy that works for us, and it depends. Project Play, obviously, we're funded by the Wilson Foundation. That is a 20-year spend down. And when it first started, you know, we had a lot of what Nicole mentioned, like, hey, we need a field, right? We had a lot of those type of things, asking for big gifts right off the bat because of the size of the foundation. Number one, recognize in our case, we have multiple funding lines though. And so everyone knows money goes quick, especially when you're talking about parks, trails, workforce development, caregiving, all the things that the Wilson Foundation does. You know, but so make sure that you are, you know, kind of developing the story in a way in which that can be easily communicated, and kind of understanding where you fit in their overall plan. So, for example, we often talk about when people were coming in and asking for very large gifts, it was mostly sports people. So I was basically saying, like, guys, this is kind of, I use the analogy of a 4-quarter basketball game. Like, this is a 4-quarter basketball game. Like, we're in the first quarter. We're still figuring out who's on the bench. Okay. So you want to be a key player. If you see yourself in really being part of what this foundation's work could do here long haul, demonstrate that you're a key player, you're in it to win it, like that type of thing. And understand that if you're dealing with the spend down, that will change over time. And so, you know, your initial ask, if it's real large and you get a no, follow up on that. But also try to see what the foundation is doing and how your story fits in that, and be able to communicate it that way. I think not coming in off the bat and asking for a really large gift, I've never seen that go very well.
I think to me that speaks to the research piece, right? So again, when I, you know, when I work with organizations around how to do asks and what's the, right, there always comes up what's the appropriate ask amount. So, you know, we work with them around looking at the 990 or looking at past grantee lists to see that range of giving, right? And exactly to your point that if you see, right, and foundations report on that. Sometimes you have to dig a little bit to really find the information. Certainly larger foundations have that on their websites, lists of past grantees and, you know, even amounts, but other foundations, you can find it in their 990, which is, you know, public information. But if you see that the range of giving is between $25,000 and $50,000, do not come in and ask for $150,000 to that point. So really, again, it speaks to doing your homework before you go in there. And it really does save you time on the back end, because then you'll really understand, are we a good fit? And I would say when you have, because many organizations that we work with are small, I would say small to mid-size with, you know, $10 million budgets and below, and probably don't have a grant writer on staff, and maybe only have one development person, if anybody. And so you really want to be mindful of how you're using your time. And it may seem like a quick win to go for those quick $1,000 or $2,500 grants, but over the long term, spending that time and trying to build a